Congratulations, you've been chosen to run sound. If you're watching this video, you're probably a loser freshman theater kid who got randomly picked off the street for a high school play, or the pastor at your church volunteered you because you're young and you're supposed to know how to do all of the technologies. Regardless of your case, you have no idea what you're doing and did what anybody else in this day and age would do and asked the internet. Well, fret not, you're in the right place. I happen to know enough about this subject to make your show, at the very least, not suck. So let's get started. Anybody watching this video knows what sound is, unless you're fresh out of the womb and the first thing the doctor did was pull out an iPad and show you this video. In that case, goo goo gaga wah wah goo goo. Which roughly translates to sound is what happens when things shake really fast. The harder something shakes, the louder the sound, and we call that volume, which is measured in decibels. Most of you are familiar with this concept of volume. If you're listening to music and there's construction next to you, you turn your volume up a little. If there's someone trying to talk to you, you turn your volume all the way up. There's more to sound than just volume, but I'm assuming you're not mixing for Metallica, so that explanation should be good enough. As a beginner in sound, your only job is to make sure the show runs smoothly and that things are heard clearly. And you'll do that with the help of this thing. And these things. Now it's time to gather your equipment. The venue you're working in should already have most of these things ready for you, and if it doesn't, your next step is to go cry in a corner. The next step after that is to ask around and find out what you need. This list of essentials usually includes microphones, sound cables, a soundboard, and speakers. I'm going to be going through all of this, so buckle up and put up your tray tables because I'll be using a really bad airport analogy to get us through this. First, let's set up the analogy. Let's say sound waves are passengers and these passengers need to get to their destination. In this case, our destination is the audience's ear holes. One method to get there was just be to shout really loud. This is the equivalent of a road trip. It works for smaller distances, but the farther you go, the more likely you are to get lost. Applicably, the larger the venue, the farther the sound has to travel and the less effective yelling becomes. That's where microphones come in. Think of it as an airport terminal. The passengers go into the terminal in order to board the plane to their destination. Most venues will be relying on these kinds of microphones, or as us nerds call them, dynamic microphones. The most common one you'll see is the Shure SM58, which is a fact you didn't need to know, I just wanted to flex a little bit. If you're running sound for theater, however, you'll most likely be using these mics, called lavaliers or lavs. These mics are almost always wireless and are bendy so they can be positioned on an actor's face optimally. Mic placement is very important in both cases, but I'll talk about that a bit later. Basically, all you need to know is that this is where your sound is going to be sourced from, and that it's perfectly okay to have a karaoke session before actors come in for rehearsals. Next, you're going to need some cables to connect your mic to. Mic cables are called XLR cables and look like this. You'll also need one from your soundboard to the speakers. There's not much else to say about these for now besides please for the love of God wrap them up correctly after you're done. Wrapping cables neatly saves the next guy a lot of trouble when they need to use them. Nobody wants to have to wrangle these absolute abominations Steve Irwin style. Now that you have your mic plugged in, you want to connect it to the soundboard, or as we nerds call it, the audio interface. Now this is probably overloading your tiny little brain with shiny little switches and buttons, but don't worry. Since you're only a little audio baby, you only need to worry about these sections for now. To understand the purpose of the soundboard, let's think of it like a TSA in an airport. Yes, you could let any and all passengers immediately board the plane, but that means they could bring potentially dangerous or disruptive objects like scissors or children. To have more control of what goes in and out of the airport, we slap TSA in between to make sure that we only get good passengers on their destination and get rid of any unwanted stuff. It's not a perfect system as babies still manage to get aboard, but we can catch most of the smaller things. The same thing applies with the soundboard. Sound goes in, we mess around with the sound a little bit, and then we send it to the speakers. Like I said, you only have to worry about these sections, but first you need an input. In this video, I'll be using a Behringer X32 as an example, as it's the industry standard and the most common I've seen. But if yours is different, fret not, all boards should have the same functions. You just might have to look around a little. If your board looks like this, you're working with an analog board, which I won't cover in this video, but the concept should remain the same, just with little knobby bits instead. You'll find your input ports in the back of the console. Pay attention to which input you plug your mic into because that corresponds with the channel number, which can be found here. Now that we're at channels, let's explore these a bit. If your mic is working and turned on, you should be able to see the signals of your mic here. You can control the volume here and find your channel name here. This button does exactly what it says it does, and this one, when pressed, plays a sweet guitar solo. Just kidding, you can only really use this button with headphones plugged in, which by the way, the port should be in the side here. Essentially, if something's sounding wonky, you can slap on a set of cans and go through every single channel to find out which mic is making that weird buzzing sound. Another thing to note is this, the main fader that controls your main speakers. If you can't hear anything when you're mic testing, check here first to make sure that you weren't a stupid idiot that had their main fader all the way down. Some boards have a little screen up here where you can do some other cool little things. But I'll let you look that up on your own because not every board has it and we're only going through the bare minimum. After you set up your mic, you're going to want to plug in your speakers. Now your main monitors should already be set up. In fact, you need to pray and hope that they are, because if they're not, you'll most likely need to learn how to route, which I cannot teach you, and you'll most likely want to go back to that corner from earlier. If you need to plug in any extra monitors, the outputs can be found in the back again. You most likely need to route any extra monitors to these bus channels. Now I know I made routing sound really bad earlier, but really most of the time you can Google it and find most of what you need. I just have a seething hatred towards routing for reasons I will not disclose. Congratulations, you know what your basic equipment does. So now it's time to move on to setting up your sound plot. Basically, we're just planning out where things should go and how they should be set up. This will vary from show to show, so you'll have to use your best judgment on this one. For example, let's say that this is the space you're working with and you're running a choir performance, so they have the performers split up as so. Let's say they also have a live orchestra performing with them on stage. So how do you set this up? Do you put the singers up front and the musicians in the back because we want the singers to be in the focus? Wrong, dum-dum. If we do that, then the blaring horns or other instruments will get heard by the mics and overwhelm the singers, and will make the show sound like the audio equivalent of Grandma's Mystery Stew. So instead, we put the singers in the mics in the back and the musicians in the front. That way we only get the singers through the mics and we can make sure that the voices are heard over the instruments. How do we get the choir in focus then? Well, that's not your problem. Your job is to make them sound good, even if that means moving a few things around. Speaking of which, general rule, try to position mics away from speakers as much as possible. This avoids a fun little sound you might know called feedback. Feedback occurs when a mic is positioned too close to a speaker. So when a mic gets signal, it gets sent out of the speaker, which goes into the mic, which gets sent out of the speaker, which goes into the mic, which gets sent out of the speaker, which goes into the mic, which gets sent out of the speaker, which goes into the mic, which gets sent out of the speaker. You get the picture. Not pretty, avoid it at all costs. Well, this is it. You've got everything set up and all you have to do now is run it with the performers. If your job was to set up one mic for a guy to speak for an hour and a half, congrats. Just sit back and make sure nothing blows up. If you're running sound for any other sort of performing art, rehearsal day is the day you find out that all of your hard work and planning has to be completely scrapped because all of a sudden now the blocking's changed and now the actors are doing backflips and playing instruments. Also the actor has a costume change, so you have to tape the mic to their face in a different way. Now the director said that this isn't right, so now I have to go back and just relax. It's okay. Yeah, this stuff is really annoying. Sometimes things aren't as you thought, or the director decides to change something last minute, but things like this just happen. You're only human, so don't feel like you have to do everything perfectly the first time. If there's an issue, don't beat yourself up about it, just remember to keep a level head and work it out logically. Things like mixing sound levels, perfectly timing sound cues, and setting up sound systems are skills that take experience to get good at. So if you can at least get the show to run smoothly on your first time ever running sound, consider it a job well done. Because at the end of the day, you were the one that was chosen to run sound, and nobody can tell you how to do your job. Except for me, who just did. What do you mean the video has to be 15 minutes long? They're beginners. They don't need that much information. They're good with this, right? They have to be. Okay, you know what? Fine. I'll do 15 minutes. Alright. Hi again. I guess since we have a little bit of time on our hands, we'll go over a little bit of basic sound design. It's not much, especially for a beginner. You won't need to know any of this, honestly. I'm just gonna get into it. It's pretty easy. You'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. But first, we need a little bit of audio. So let's just record a little bit of test stuff. This is some test audio. Test 1 2. Mic check. Oh, that was actually a bug. Okay. Cool. Sick. Alright, so now that we have that, we can actually get into some sound design stuff. Let's just go over some waveforms first. You've probably seen this before. This is called a waveform. Let's see if we can zoom in on this a little bit. Basically, when sound is visualized in programs like this, they're called waveforms. You get these little mountains, and that basically tells you different information about the sound. The only real thing you need to know about waveforms is the bigger the louder. You can see over here. It got really loud, and you can see that instead of the little pointy peak, it has a little straight line. That means our audio is clipped. So if I play that, you'll notice a little bit of audio information is missing. That's basically what that means. We've peaked, we've clipped the audio, we've clipped off that little top there. Imagine it like cutting it off with scissors. So if I play this here, it's gonna sound horrible. Sorry. Mic check out. Yeah, that was bad. But pretty easy in audio editing terms. You can just go ahead and take this section out and just press delete, and it's gone, and you don't have to worry about that. In a live setting, though, if you're peaking or clipping, you might want to turn down the volume. You'll see that in your little signal indicator. It'll be like red usually. It'll blink red. A little post-edit note, I say volume here in the video, but you probably want to turn down the gain on the mic in a live setting. That will probably help with peaking a little bit more. You can do both, but I just wanted to make that distinction. Gain on a mic, it's gonna control that mic a little bit more. Some other sound design stuff. Most programs will have effects, and you probably heard the term EQ thrown around. This is basic. This is Reaper EQ. But basically, as we play the sound here, this is some test audio. Test 1 2. You can see that those little bumps and waves, they'll show you what frequencies are present. To the left is lower frequency, to the right is higher frequency. You can move these things around and, you know, adjust how much of each frequency you're hearing. So if I, say for one, turn this all the way down, just cut out all of that low end. This is some test audio. Test 1 2. Mic check. Yeah, it kind of sounds like you're on the telephone. Actually, if I did this, I think I can actually make it. This is some test audio. Test 1 2. Mic check. So yeah, you can create some pretty cool effects by moving these knobs around. These little points. Basically, you move these around, it changes what frequencies are heard. It boosts the gain. It boosts the volume, essentially, of the higher or lower frequencies. Yeah, usually this is used just to like make audio sound better, maybe clean it up a little. So say you wanted a little bit more mid-range, which is where the human voice lives, by the way, a little fun fact. This is some test audio. Test 1 2, as opposed to without the EQ. This is some test audio. Test 1 2. You can definitely tell there's a little bit of a difference. See if I can get to like a setting that actually like people would use. 1 2. Yeah, I probably made it worse, honestly. But you get the point. Equalization. Yeah, that's what it stands for, by the way. EQ, equalization. That's what that does. Play around with it if you want. Usually there's also some other effects. Reverb just makes it sound bigger. So if I... Oh wait, this is the wrong effect. This is some test audio. Test 1 2. Mic check. Yeah, you can see it gives it a little bit more volume space in terms of space volume. You can most audio editing programs have presets, so if you don't want to mess around with the knobs too much, say this is some test audio. Test 1 2. So now we sound like we're in a dark corridor or something. I don't know. I've never been in such a dark corridor myself, so I wouldn't be able to confirm, but something along those lines. Yeah, there's some cool things with audio editing. I encourage you to look it up yourself. I'm just not going to go through everything because you don't need to know everything. At least not yet. But I think that's essentially it for audio design. I mean, oh wait, here's the funny effect. Okay, so this is the effect that the funny people use in some of their videos. I don't think it's that funny, honestly, but just to show you what it is. It's called distortion. It does exactly that. Distorts the audio so it sounds really bad. Warning, it's gonna sound really bad. This is some test audio. Yeah, no, it's bad. There's a lot of stuff. Just play around with it. Get Audacity or something, it's free. Don't spend $60 like I did on audio software. Yeah, that's about it. That's all I got for you. Now go do sound things or whatever. I don't know. How do you end a video?